Star Wars, as a franchise, is pure escapism. It transported many kids from their boring and monotonous life in the suburbs to a galaxy far, far away. Skeleton Crew asks the questions, what if there were bored kids in the suburbs imagining cool Star Wars stuff that lived in the Star Wars universe? I, for one, think that this is a terrible idea that ruins the mystique and magic of the Star Wars universe. Like, the Star Wars universe has boring planets with cookie-cutter, car-dependent neighborhoods like real life. That's no fun. But honestly, at this point, I can't force myself to care about the damage done to the imaging universe of Star Wars. The series has been raked over the coals so many times in recent years that it's at the point of who even cares. As long as it's not assassinating a beloved character or feels like actual torture to watch, boom, amazing show, critically acclaimed on Rotten Tomatoes. Enough ranting about the premise. What are the specifics of the show? Well, there are some ordinary kids in the suburbs who are on the cusp of taking a test to determine their job for the rest of their lives. They discover a spaceship and through a series of extremely contrived events end up on the other side of the galaxy with no clear way home. It stars Jude as a suspicious man who helps them on their journey to get back home. Ravi Cabot-Conyers as Wim, an impulsive kid who is obsessed with Jedi. Kyriana Cratlet as KB, a cybernetically enhanced child with an aptitude for machines. Ryan Kira Armstrong as Fern, a kid with an authority problem that loves to get in trouble. Robert Timothy Smith as Neil, a Mykian kid that is much more passive and rule-following than the rest of the crew. And finally, Nick Frost as SM-33, a droid that was on the ship when the kids found it. I find it hard to talk about this show because of how completely unremarkable and middle of the road the whole thing is. It makes sense that this is the least viewed Star Wars show because it's not bad enough to hate and not good enough to recommend. Watching the show is experiencing apathy. It's neither good nor bad enough to provoke any significant emotional response, which I guess makes it better than the majority of Star Wars shows because I didn't feel like I was being lobotomized by watching it because of the bad writing and stupidity on screen. That's not to say there are not writing issues in the show though. The show is extremely contrived and has to contort itself to make its concept work, constantly introducing new plot points to explain why our heroes can't do X, Y, or Z. The show is full of cliches and feels like if you put a bunch of 80s coming of age stories into a blender. Everyone is calling this the Stranger Things Star Wars show. I've never seen Stranger Things, but as far as I know, Stranger Things is about kids, but not for kids. This show feels like it's for children in tone and in dialogue. It does not feel like a family appropriate / for all ages family film like the 80s properties they are ripping off. Watching this show is like watching a super high budget Disney Channel original movie, which I doubt is Disney's goal since the show cost $136 million. It lacks the edge that all of the 80s and 90s coming of age films have. A big problem I have with the show is how sanitized the kids feel. They don't feel like actual kids, which is usually what you get in a good coming of age movie. Like, for example, in The Goonies and The Sandlot, the kids are assholes. They're always bullying other kids. In The Sandlot, they're straight up chewing tobacco and drinking. And even though those films are appropriate for children, adults can enjoy them too, and the kids act like real kids. They don't act like how kids in a kids movie traditionally act, which is why I think those movies have stood the test of time and why people like them so much. When you watch them, even as an adult, it makes you remember what being a kid was like and being an asshole and getting into trouble and doing things you're not supposed to do. This show, on the other hand, like I said, is more in line with how kids are portrayed in like a Disney Channel original movie, where they're perfectly sanitized. They might get in a little bit of trouble, but it's always for the right reason. I will say, while like I said, the whole show is extremely okay, the last 4 episodes, meaning the back half of the show, are much more interesting than the first 4. They still aren't amazing, but they are an improvement. The episodes in the first half feel very uneventful and toothless. Several of the first few episodes feel lacking in plot development, especially the first 2 episodes specifically, which should have had their events combined to be just all in the first episode. There's way too much setup. What I think is even a bigger issue is the missing sense of danger in the first half. In the same way the kids feel sanitized and toothless, in the first half of the show, the villains do too. They're not threatening, and the kids usually don't even seem that scared. And to compare this show to the Goonies again, the villains put Chunk's hand into a fucking blender and are gonna blend it into pieces if he doesn't help them find One-Eyed Willie's lost treasure. Whereas in this, the first half at least, none of the villains are threatening at all. Both the issues of the lack of plot advancement and the villains not feeling threatening are mostly fixed in the second half, with the episodes usually being more eventful and the situations the kids find themselves in having a much better sense of danger with more intimidating villains and the kids actually seeming afraid. But even in the second half, where the villains are more threatening, we still have shades of the typical kids movie issue of the heroes not succeeding because of their own wits and skills, but rather the incompetence of the antagonists. The plot of this show has a lot of holes and little things that don't make any sense, and while none of them are super major, they all add up. Oh, and before I move on, I just want to bring up something the kids do constantly in this show, which irritates the fuck out of me, which is whisper extremely loudly to each other how they plan to get out of a situation while being like 3 feet away from the person who put them in that situation that would easily be able to hear the extremely loud children. There is a decent amount of comedy in this show, but only one joke in the entire show made me laugh. The rest range from okay to bad. Like the rest of this show, the humor is very bland. The action isn't much to write home about either. Since our main characters are children, we can't have much hand-to-hand combat, and usually the kids are just running away from the bad guys and occasionally kicking them. There are a good amount of dogfight action scenes, but they are nothing special and pretty forgettable. Something that is great about the show, though, is the special effects. Both the CGI and practical effects are great. The sets and environments look great as well. The suburbs planet they start on is an amazing looking environment, even though I don't like it and think it looks way too much like Earth. I will admit that they did a very good job making it feel like a real location. The other planets they go to look great as well and also feel like actual environments rather than a green screen. The interior set of their ship looks great and feels lived in and worn as Star Wars interiors usually do. And as you expect from Star Wars, the CGI ships look great when they're in dogfights. Completely perfect CGI. My favorite part though is the practical effects for the alien characters. They all look amazing and you believe them as alien creatures rather than a guy in an animatronic suit. I am also glad to see an alien main character in Star Wars for once. Well, one that speaks galactic basic at least. Anyway, that's all I have to say about Skeleton Crew. It's an extremely forgettable middle-of-the-road show that I would not recommend watching. While it's not painful to watch, it's not pleasant either. The whole show gives the impression of a repurposed script with Star Wars tacked on and an attempt to fit a square peg in a round hole. Anyway, have you seen Skeleton Crew? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below and be sure to like and subscribe for more content. And if you like this video, check out my video on the Book of Boba Fett to hear me talk about a truly terrible Star Wars show. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.